technology, because I must admit this isn't the first time I've ever given a talk using this equipment. So this evening I'd like to give you an introduction to the Rewley Road swing bridge, and we get a lot of questions. Why is there a swing bridge there? It didn't really have to be there, is the honest answer. So I'll take you through what happened to cause the swing bridge to be built. When I was area manager at Oxford about 1978, I decided this was a rather interesting structure, not just an ordinary iron bridge that turned. So we got the station building at the front listed because that was one of Paxton's design buildings that was used at the Great Exhibition, and that now stands at Quainton Road Station. But the swing bridge I found was very interesting because it's one of only two in the country, and the first one that Stevenson used to experiment with the use of steel. So I applied to list both buildings. I was coming back from a meeting at Worcester in a hurry because I was a scout leader at Garsington. I was running late. So I said to Judy, my secretary, she completed the form. She says, "Oh, can you check them?" I said, "No." I signed them both, and off they went in the post. Unbeknown to me, there were examples of forms that I would need to use to list the station building, the swing bridge. The swing bridge got listed as an ancient monument, and that is why it can't be moved and it couldn't be sold. And the further complication was when I came back to Network Rail in 1997, I found that the preservation work that I'd set up when I left Oxford in 1986 hadn't gone ahead. But what I hadn't realised was the bridge was listed in its rightful position, and that is across the stream, because the stream wasn't a canal. And I managed to get the Oxford Preservation Trust to take it on as a restoration project because they had nothing that was engineering wise. Most of it centred around the university or churches and old buildings, but it was often nothing at all on the engineering side. So in 2003, I gave them £20,000 from Network Rail, and we set up a group to preserve the bridge and do what we should have done with the University Society in 1986. Sadly, it took until 2013 to change the listing order for the bridge to be restored where it stands today. Apparently, we should have left it across the stream. How people would have got by on the boats after the station closed, I don't know. But it took us 10 years to get the authorities to change the listing. But lucky, managed to raise just over £1 million, and we started the restoration work in 2020. Anyway, why was the bridge built? Brunel wouldn't accept the Gauge Act in 1846, which suggested that standard gauge would be the permanent gauge for the British Isles. And he continued to use broad gauge, and he even continued to build broad gauge lines. And in 1850, in September 1850, he opened the line from Kennington Junction to Banbury, aiming to go and join the London North Western at Rugby, and you can still see part of that embankment near Fenny Compton signal box that he abandoned. When he decided, in order to make the Buckinghamshire Railway from Bletchley to what we now know as Rewley Road into broad gauge, he, having agreed in 1844 with the Duke of Buckinghamshire that the railway they were planning from Bletchley to Oxford could join his railway he was planning to go to Banbury with, He didn't mention anything about the gauge, and he obviously expected to win the war against the raw gauge in 1846. So by the time Stevenson's men were approaching Islip with the line from Bletchley, they found that he was adamant it would not join his multi-gauge track at Wolvercut as originally agreed in 1844. He made no mention of it, and the Buckinghamshire Railway decided they'd make their terminus on the outskirts of the city at Islip Station and what we now know as Oxford Parkway. And they set up their own office in the Star Hotel at Oxford, and a horse omnibus service to go to Oxford Road Station, and they made that into a proper station. And the Shipley Colliery Company, who had close connections with the people of Oxford and supplied the coal, they built a weighbridge and office, and the line opened only 3 months after Brunel had opened his line to Banbury, and the line from Bletchley opened as far as Oxford, what we know as Parkway, 3 months later. Unbeknown to the building the Bletchley Railway, they'd been spending some of their spare time at Islip, where there were 5 coaching hotels there, and that apparently was on the main coaching route from Oxford to the north. And they'd been talking to somebody who was connected with St Mary's Church in Oxford, and he was desperate for money to restore a chapel. And he actually worked for Christ Church, who owned the Rewley Abbey site. This had been derelict since 1535. And they'd been selling stone from that site for several centuries to local people for use. And he offered stone to the Buckinghamshire Railway to build a branch line parallel to Brunel's Railway if they could get permission to come over Port Meadow. And the conversation went on to say, well, would you like to buy some land to build your station? So the Buckinghamshire Railway agreed to buy the complete site, but they couldn't connect the railway because the freemen of Oxford wouldn't allow them to come over Port Meadow parallel with Brunel's Railway. But a few days later, it turned out they were short of money for a school they were going to build. And they were also short of money in their pension funds. So, surprise, surprise, the freedmen said, could we do the same as Christ Church? And if we sell part of Port Meadow, and you'll see the boundary signs nearly a quarter of a mile away from where the present railway is now to the west of the railway line. Would you pay for the shortfall in our pension fund? And Stevenson's men and the Duke of Buckingham said yes. And within 6 months of opening the temporary station at Oxford Road, we had the opening of Rewley Road Station, and that was only possible if they could find a way of bridging the stream. So Stevenson's men were aware that they'd been experimenting in 1849 with a swing bridge at Crewe. They asked Robert Stevenson when they went back some weeks later, was there any possibility they could have this swing bridge and how much would it cost? Stevenson apparently said, take it, and it was brought by rail, and they converted it to gain entry into the roadside because the rules said, I think it was 10'6" or something, you had to have clearance for boats to pass underneath. They couldn't afford to build the embankment to provide a bridge of that height, so they built the swing bridge. So a lot of people say, why was it a swing bridge? It was really because Brunel wouldn't accept it, lost the war with broad gauge. And he didn't allow them to join that line. In fact, they didn't join until 1941 in the Second World War. And the OWW, the Oxford, Worcester and Wolverhampton Railway, he was made to construct that as double gauge, although he wasn't allowed to travel on the one and only train that made the journey to Worcester from Wolverhampton, because the London North Western and Midland Railway people had have nothing to do with the Great Western Railway. 3 months before the Act was passed, he changed his rugby line to go to Birmingham Snow Hill and started building that, thinking that would make people fall for the broad gauge, which it didn't. So the OWW didn't join the line that we know today until 1863. And you'll see on the map, sorry, I'm talking, and that is the site of Rewley Road Abbey. I don't know how you lift the picture up and down, but the bridge is just there, and this is the complete site that the railway bought, and that's Brunel's railway there. And those of you that remember Oxford Station in the 1980s, that's all we actually had, and the rest of this was the derelict Rewley Road Station side.
I haven't seen the map.
So
I don't know what.
that's it. Yes, right. Thank you.
This is what people at home sing.
Yeah.
Oh, they're thinking it, I'll try.
So this is where the Rewley Road site allowed them to build. That's where the swing bridge was built. And this was Brunel Railway, edged in green there. And in the Rewley Road yard, we had the Shipley colliery sidings, and they were known as Shipley sidings from the day it opened to the day it closed in 1984. And the Shipley coal was purchased by the people of Oxford for 80p a tonne. And it took 3 days, and apparently they had 240 tonnes a week delivered, whereas it was taking 3 weeks on the canal. And at the same time, in today's money, that was costing £1.47 a tonne. And the Emila Munders, who owned Shipley collieries, their children had gone to university in Oxford and had close connections with Oxford. And for that reason, the N&W brought the coal from Shipley collieries, which was near Ilkeston, where I used to live. So these are there's the Parkway station there. That was Islip Station. You can see they arrived in October 50, December 50, and they arrived at Rewley Road 3 weeks after the Great Exhibition opened in May 1851. So that all happened in a very short period of time, with less than 6 months. But had it have not been for Brunel, despite the fact this had got standard gauge on, reneging on his agreement of 1844 with the stations in Oxford. And the North Junction was put in November 1940. And the OWW, if you want to win a competition at Charlbury raising money for the church, and somebody asks you where would you have arrived in London if you caught a train at Charlbury in 1860, the answer should be Euston, not Paddington, because the trains from Worcester actually went across here to London Euston, and there was a temporary branch line till 1863 into Rewley Road. And despite the fact Wolvergate Station had been built by Brunel's men and terminated there at Wolvergate in 1853, and so he got a railway terminating here and terminating there, and he still wouldn't allow them to join and nobody could legally make him do that. So quite a complicated history, really. So I think covered most of the points there. Sorry about this, I'm not used to talking with a press button. So yes, the first passenger train crossed the bridge on the 21st of May 1851, and the Great Exhibition had opened on the 1st of May 1851, and took school children from Oxford, 400 of them on the first day, and also school children. That's at 7:30. The first train was arranged to go to the Great Exhibition Centre, and the last passenger train left in October 1951. They were transferred to the Great Western Station. Although those of you who worked at Oxford will know that the Great Western took over Rewley Road in 1935. And there was only, I believe, the engineering part that remained with the LMS.
And I just think again, pictures for some reason.
Sorry, bye.
Well, no, it was on that one. It didn't go back. You went back to that
Yeah.
one and you were talking and they didn't catch up.
And as I said, Shipley coal sidings remained in use right the way through to the 11th of May. And I must admit, it was a long time before I realised why they were called Shipley sidings. And I hadn't realised, because I was scout leader of Ilkeston, Mrs. Mundy's scout group, which was the owner of Shipley Collieries. And you'll notice if you leave the Great Western Station to walk towards Rewley Road, the road is called Shipley Way. I had that named, as we'd always siding there. What's I? So in the station yard, we had the Shipley sidings. The passenger station was there till 1951.
Just bear with me. I need to, it hasn't caught up on the.
Oh, sorry, that's working differently to the screen. Yeah, sorry about that. So we converted this in 1980 before it was sold, and I think it was Nigel Fulford and myself and Fred Higgs. One evening we altered the fence lines around here so we could make the car park, which is now part of site. But if you remember, we had very poor parking at Oxford because the Great Western Station was on a bank and this was just a derelict yard. And Rodney may remember we altered the fence and when they got it to move some of the tracks, so we could convert it unofficially to a car park. So if you stood on Rewley Road Bridge and looked towards Bletchley, there's very few photographs, but there you can see the Great Western North signal box at the end of the platform, and there's the bridge there with the signalling frame on the top. The north signal box is there, and this was Oxford Rewley Road signal box, which closed in 1957. So we actually preserved the bridge from this post here, 16 inches from the edge of the signal box through to that post there, and the bridge is now swung across on the north side. But the reason there'd be very few photographs of this site is you've got to remember that you could only walk across here when the bridge was swung across, and the members of the public wouldn't get there. And you can see the Great Western loco site here. The London North Western loco site was on this side. So that is a view into Rewley Road Station. The jam factory is there. There's the passenger station. The Great Western Station is just there. And this is Shipley sidings on the far left. And we are restoring all this virtually as you see it there today. You've got Axtell Perry and Sims Stone Yard, where some of you remember there was a crane there. That was interlocked with the bridge. So not only did the Sigma have control over the Axtell Perry and Sim crane, he had to make sure that the bridge was locked before he could operate the signals for trains to cross over the bridge. We've restored I'll show you pictures of what we've done. We've restored the track sections in the centre as they are there. Within the next couple of months, I'm hoping the Preservation Trust will be able to put the side walkways in. We've already got the bridge in a condition to turn it, so it'll be safe to at least do partial turns. So we shall convert the two open sides to roughly as it is in this photograph here. This was central 6 foot. That was left open until about 1929. So we're not going to put that back in. We're going to leave that open as it is today. There you can see the actual Perry and Sim crane that came in later years. And this is where we're cutting off the preservation. So what I'm hoping with the volunteers, and I've just given Simon a plan, I'm after a small ground signal, only about 5 foot high, to go where the end of our area is, where that stands. And that will show youngsters and others just how the signalman had control along with the bridge interlocking. And hopefully I can have a 2 or 3 lever frame there for people to operate it. That is an engine crossing the bridge in 1941. The bridge was passed for a 100-ton locomotive, so it was quite a strong structure. The next job we've got to get contractors for, because it's not safe for volunteers, is to restore the fixed span, and this is all lead painted, and like the bridge we had to cover that before any work could be undertaken for safety reasons. At the moment the vegetation comes right up to here, so we've got to get that all cleared out from under the bridge. So all this will be restored, and believe it or not, they are the original bridge fence rails, not the mess that was on there. And some of you may not agree, but I got the Preservation Trust to clear most of the mess, because I'm sure that was put on as a later date. And that's one of the few photographs we've got of a vessel passing through on the Shuey Bridge with the bridge open. And as you can see, the men couldn't go anywhere other than stand on the bridge, because apart from walking up here into the loco side, the 4 men and the inspector were standing there, and the vessels were supposed to clear within 15 minutes. You had to give 4 hours to the station inspector to have it opened, and that continued until 1984. So if you were on a barge, you couldn't expect it to be opened immediately. Just 4 hours. Those are views of the last days of the bridge. The bridge closed on the 11th of May, 1984.
Hang on, bear with me again, it still hasn't.
On,
It hasn't.
sorry.
Right, yeah. For some reason it's not switching over on it.
And there's the train propelling the loaded coal wagons in from Southend Yard. They used to come through platform 1 and then just reverse in, because we've got no loops or anything for them to shunt on. And I don't know whether it was you, Rodney, but somebody took one of the rails off to balance the bridge when we got it stuck on one occasion. It never got back on. We just used the one line into what was the single Shipley Colliery side. And there's the train just about to pull out in the last few weeks of the operation. Was going in 1984. So by 1985, the track had been removed and it was all ready for preservation work to start, and the preservation comes to the line of the crossing there. But unfortunately, we had builders who thought we were going to use it as road access to the site they bought where the loco shed stood. And they didn't really want to spend money building a road bridge. So I said to Colin, who only retired as a driver at Oxford last year, to wind the bridge back and with Freddick's supervisor, fix it so it couldn't be turned again. They did try and turn it and unfortunately broke one of the wheels, but they tried to do it without the bridge handles using large spanners, but it was only 3 teeth on one of the smaller wheels. And what Colin admitted was, I said, make sure it can't be done again. What I hadn't realised was he'd actually thrown the handles in there and we found them. They were still in the mud about 2 months ago. I told Robert, my son, who's depot manager at Oxford at the moment, what he'd done on the day he retired. That was 1984, he threw those away. And I don't know, Rodney, in order to stop anybody using the bridge, either you or your colleagues were taking the track up for me in Bicester London Road goods yard, and I wanted the chair. You've got London North Western Railway 1906 on them. If you kindly drop them complete, and I'll show you photographs in a minute, on the bridge, 4 40-foot sections, to make sure nobody could drive over the bridge. So I don't know whether that was your artwork, Rodney, or one of your colleagues.
Rodney Smith, probably.
It could have been Rodney Smith.
Yeah.
So I wanted the chairs because there were London North Western, and they were 1906. 12 months after that, we should have had a preservation group starting the restoration work, and funds had been set up for that. I moved to Provincial Railways West of England and Wales, and when I came back to Network Rail in 1997, it was still like that, but you could hardly see it for the overgrowth and trees that had grown through it, and the society had fallen by the wayside. And the builders who were supposed to be building on the site also undertook to pay towards the restoration. They actually sold off the site together with the bridge in the 1990s. And when Network Rail or Railtrack was set up, it got listed as part of the operational railway, and as late as 2019, when we handed it over, the bridge could only be turned at night wearing safety jackets because it was treated as though it was still an operational railway. So not only was it listed as an ancient monument, it got ancient restrictions. The members of the public couldn't believe it in the trust that had been set up for it. Oh, sorry. So that was what the bridge looked like before we actually started work in 2019, before the contractor started. You can see it was in a pretty poor state, and the Oxford Preservation Trust did very well to get the contract in, and the end result was that, and that's what it looked like after I'd finished with the volunteers last Friday.
Yeah,
So we move that. So here we've got to start work on the underside of the fixed span, likewise on the other side, and the trees were to this height. On both sides of the line. This was, as you saw in the picture, overgrown. At the moment, the bridge is all open. So the final contract that the Preservation Trust will be arranging is the restoration of the landing gear and the landing strips. And for that reason, I've suggested that we don't operate the bridge. So it's only been half turned because that's where we used to get it stuck in British Rail days. And it very often took us over a week to free it. And we used to have to stop the cross-country train when there were holiday makers in the summer, especially at the weekend, to exchange them at Hayford with the new holiday makers to go on the barges. So the staff will tell you they used to help them up onto the platform. We'd have a special stop order at Hayford, and Hayford used to let us know when the new holiday makers would come in. We used to help them because there was nothing we could do. The bridge used to jam, and I think on a couple of occasions it was a case of getting the 75-ton crane from Old Oak to lift her back square. You could say, why didn't I let it just go to the scrapyard? But so this is commencing work. It's all safely marked off, and the first thing was to clear the decks and get some clearance. You can see how the trees have all grown on that side. You couldn't see the trains on the main line. And this was the condition, and a lot of the local people wanted all this to be preserved, but fortunately we got records that these plates have been replaced as recently as 1938. There was nothing at all to do with the 1850 structure. And the actual beams below these are the original Stevenson experimental steel beams of 1849. But you can see the condition and slight wear and corrosion on those there. So December 2020, and this was March 21. You see the gear wheels there. Most of this is the original steel beams that have been restored. Nearly all the cross members have gone for some reason or other, and yet this was open below. I'm not quite sure why they corroded in the way they did, but they all had to be restored. And that's what she looked like with all the new steel plates on that we've got today. As you can see, the whole site had to be covered for safety reasons.
Right, did you say the plates between the rails, did you say the old ones were scrapped, but you've now replaced them?
Oh, these are the beams.
No, not those, those curved plates in the fourth.
Oh, no, they are the originals.
But what about the bottom left?
On the bottom left,
That shows those plates in the 4 and 6 foot.
these plates are actually below those curves there.
Oh, right.
They're the supports going across.
Yeah, but can I mind?
Yeah.
There seem to be some sheets of steel or iron between the girders.
Well, on
Am I looking wrong?
Yeah,
What's that left-hand picture then? Is that before they moved?
this is after they've carried out the restoration. So this is what it looked like after they put the new sheeting.
Oh, okay, right, right. So the old
Yeah.
sheeting was
Sorry,
removed.
so that's taking you from restoration of each individual plate to the cross beam.
Right.
And I haven't got any pictures, or I don't know quite how they did these intermediate beams, but for some unknown reason they well, whether it was thinner steel or what, I don't know. But all those had to be done. It was a bit of an argument to get people to accept it should be cleared completely like that, but it was pointless restoring something that wasn't even 100 years old. So this is the gearwork, and you can see we were very lucky that it was, and it's all original, 1849. It's all part of the experimenting crew yard. And it was one of these smaller cogwheels that had got 3 teeth broken on it. I don't know whether they made a new wheel or repaired it, but it certainly all works now. That's part of the original plans that we've got for 1890. Sadly, the contractors or the people we had to prepare the plans for the contractors, and I don't know whether anybody in this room knows where I might find some, but there were 4 A2 sized pictures, typical of railway plans, the size of this table, 2 sets of them with all the gearwork, all the parts of the bridge. And sadly, when I came back in Network Railways in 1997, they'd only got parts of them because apparently this firm who did the work for the contract had got them up to copy them, but it appears they never came back to the Preservation Trust. So that's why, Richard, in addition to asking you, can I have 7 chairs, please, and if you've got some balls, I'm also hoping that probably somebody here might have some knowledge of where we may find some other original plans, because they were not at Paddington, because it was London North Western LMS, and therefore weren't at, forgotten what the building was, that got all your plans in for the Great Western near Paddington Station, but they weren't registered, and we've only got parts of the plans, and especially for the landing gear, we can't find any detail on those at all, other than the rusting elements we've got today. But as you can see, these gear wheels are in very good condition, and they certainly look very strong. Whilst it was the floods, these were all covered, and we've got pumps which are working again to keep the area clear, and the wheels, that there's controls on both sides of the bridge. You must have 4 men to on each set of these here, and they turn, you can see, and it goes through onto the rollers that roll around on the large circle that is complete, and that's all cast iron and original. Now, when you go to visit the bridge, sadly, you can't see this because we had the bridge jacked up during the repair work. Unfortunately, none of it fell to pieces, it hadn't rusted, but I'm afraid visitors have to look at these pictures we took to see what is below this level, because the gap is only about 1 inch. And there's only a very small trapdoor, which Charles, one of the new volunteers who works for the Oxford Preservation Trust, says he's going to risk, because we a fortnight ago started greasing these wheels ready for use. And it's incredible how small this gap is, because the wheel is in the way. And you know, you've got to be a very slim person to get in. We're trying to work out whether we can get some brushes or something, but I mean, that's a heck of a width to come in here, little trapdoor there, to get round the whole of that wheel. But somehow we've got to learn how to grease it. I wouldn't like to say how my staff used to do it in the 1970s, but that's probably why it used to stick in the tip and had the grease on it. That was the Flying Scotsman before Network Rail damaged it last night, going in the opposite direction on a special, crossing the bridge just after the contractors had finished. But sadly, I'm told by Simon, was damaged somewhere near family was over 3 hours late arriving at Didcot Centre last night. But yes, she goes over there at least once or twice a year these days. You see, we haven't laid the track on this bit here, it's the track. So these are the next project to restore this. And I'm trying to find out, Simon's agreed to let me have the few chairs that I'm short on to complete this job with the volunteers. But somebody has twisted this landing gear here, and we haven't got the plans for it. And we're not sure because this end of the landing gear is pointing up in the air. So if we turn the bridge round, the bridge here will hit that first. And that probably is the damage when those builders tried to use it and got the lorry stuck on it and had to have a crane to lift the lorry off. Now it's probably been damaged. The contractors we employed had no knowledge of that sort of work. So that's the one piece that we're in real trouble with, going out to restore that. And I don't know whether anybody after the meeting have got any ideas to help us or to find some contacts. And in the same way, we've got this landing gear to restore. That is well and truly rusted, and the operating unit on the end of the bridge pier, most of that has rusted and collapsed or been stolen, because it did stand from at least 1985 till 2003. And I suppose people see old bits with London North Western Railway or something common, or a bit of rusting chair and think, oh, that would like nice at a museum or in my garden sort of thing. And you can imagine why some of the smaller bits have disappeared. Oh yes, I've forgotten. I've actually got a photograph of the landing gear. So we've got to restore this so that will slide. And just here, you can see the landing gear on the other side. We've now cleared this about 3 months ago. And that's why it's taken me so long, Simon, to give you what I want to complete this bit. But this is the piece that is completely bent, and I can't see how we make to straighten it at the moment. And there you can see the controls for the landing gear. So once you've turned the bridge and the bridge is in place, the operators then have to operate this beam, which lifts the bridge off the cogwheel. So before a train can pass over, the bridge has to be lifted, and it's lifted about 3 inches. But at the moment, that on this side, in this vegetation, we found the other week, is well and truly twisted. It appears to be one long steel beam on each side. The bolts are well and truly rusted. Whether we could take it to a firm to be heated and straightened, or whether we'll have to have a new one built, I don't know. But when Charles and I looked at it, it's not only bent upwards, it's bent outwards with a small letter S formation in it. So I don't think it's a case of getting a clamp to bend it, even if you were strong enough. So that probably is going to be the one item that delays the operation of the bridge, which we're hoping we've done it for this summer, but certainly for next summer when she's 175 years old. But anybody who's got any brain waves, this is my area manager DIY of trying to be an engineer, as who mistakenly had me at Thames, don't they? Announcement for the talk. We've identified what all the track work is, and the yellow bits are the bits that I'm short of to complete the job. And Simon and Richard think they'll be able to help me out. And since a fortnight ago, we've actually found, Richard and Simon, that runs down there in all the undergrowth, there's another steel plate, so it's made the job even easier. So I now only need 4 railway sleepers. I've got plenty of chair bolts, got 8 pieces of 40-foot bullet there, but I haven't got the small pieces because they've warped over the years. And then on the other pier, we've got the original locking frames there, as well as the ones that we used for manual operation and not for the signal box in the middle. So we're having those taken off and putting on what it would be in 1890. And all I'm short of is 2 of those angle frames, a few metres of point rotting, and that follows the actual alignment of the original rodding. And there you can see we've got the plans for the actual locking gear. And this is a copy of the 1890 plan. It's just a shame we haven't got the bits that show all this working on the abutment. And then to interest children and to show them how the signal would have worked it, the signal box stood immediately here at the end of the bridge, as you saw on those old photographs. And I've suggested to the Preservation Trust we have either a 2 or 3 lever miniature ground frame, and you could actually show the children how the signal would make sure when the bridge is turned, it's actually safe for a train to go over, so you can get your silver threepenny bit only just in between the rails to prove it's locked. And the signalman then would pull the lever, and when that was pulled, he could then pull the signal off. And as you saw in one of those pictures, if we had a part of a ground signal on a pole that's probably only 1.5 meters tall, not 3 meters tall, it would provide an added interest. And the reason I say that is we had a party of school children come along, 8, 9-year-olds, and somebody offered them 8 by 4 foot sheets of plywood to paint a picture of the bridge with a train going over. Instead, they had 5 panels, and they made them into jam jars, one of them as a wagon, because the jam factory, Cooper's jam factory across the road, one coal on it. I think I've got a picture on this display somewhere. And, you know, they were very pleased and had taken an interest. I know some of the older people said, oh, you know, you shouldn't have things like that on the boards. And for the open day, we had them on show. All that's wrong. But I mean, that's what children are interested in, and that's where they learn. So again, we want to, and I thought that ground frame might be a way forward. So here we are. That is how we've restored the centre. This is how we want to put the planks on, and again, Richard and Simon, we can't find the planks. I assume these cross beams just rest on each side of the bridge. There seems to be no sign of any original bolt holes. If we have the planks the correct length, so we could lift them and keep them. We clean these every month now and spray clean them. They did them last week. So what I'm hoping is we just have the narrow strips for safety to walk along. We won't be allowing people to operate the bridge other than those that's trained. And we leave these completely clear so people can see them. It's pointless covering with wood and letting the panels just rust away underneath. And you'll see from some of the pictures that in later years, I presume it was actually the loco side that were responsible for the bridge. Whenever a hole appeared, they just got another plank or a sheet of plywood and then over the top. So we don't want to get back to that, but I am interested in a little advice as to how I make sure these will be safe when we fix them. And also because we had to go, I think it was Africa in the end, to get the beams the correct length for the longitudinal strips. We didn't get them from anywhere in the British Isles. They were quite costly, and of course, obviously, you want hardwood. You don't want something that you've got to replace every 10 or 15 years. So that's how she stands today. And this is also the other major job, repairing this control unit, because that has collapsed completely. And we may have to make some parts for that. But you can see this locking gear here, and that's what we want to repeat. There's a bit of rod in there, as far as you can see it to there. And then, and when we've got that post there, we shall preserve, but we're not preserving the overhead gantry. That didn't appear until the 1890s, 1906. So, and it'll also spoil the view as you walk over for the train crew going to the carriage sidings from Oxford Station. And as you come in on the Chiltern line, you get a good view, especially now we've cleared all these trees in the last 2 months. You get a very good view of the swing bridges as you come into platform 1 and 2. See what I keep doing, holding it upside down. Yes, there's what the children did, and I don't think that was a bad idea of an engine on an 8x4 page, you know. Obviously, the screen thinks it's back now. There you go. I mean, it looks like an engine driver. They got cattle in because they had cattle. I thought, I think that was a type of jam. Anyway, it went on, and there was a beer bottle as one, and you know. But it's amazing how people get so critical of you know, what youngsters do. And it's not damaging it. I mean, it only lasted for 3-4 months. And that was the other end of the station that now stands at Quainton Road, and that's the original 1850s passenger station building. The same contractor who built the Great Exhibition was the contractor that built the station only 6 months later. And some of these are probably spare parts from the Great Exhibition Centre, which was destroyed by fire in the 1930s, I think. And some would be recreated, but so Rewley Road was quite an important place. And we've won 2 awards up to now. Yes, that. So are there any questions? Well, short time. Yeah. Well, he said that's what happens working on East Midlands train.
Must be listening.
I worked for 31 years with the Great Western Railway, and I don't think I fell out with any of it. Anyway, I'll sit down and behave myself. Any questions or any offers of help with what I don't know?
A non-railway question. What's the current river passage of Thames? What's it used for, if anything? Just curious.
There's 1 or 2 odd vessels a week during the winter months. In the summer, you can get 10 or 20 holiday makers going through. And obviously now it's been tidied up. It's no longer a heap of vegetation.
Yeah.
People are wanting to stop. That is the other thing we've got to work out. Can we allow barges to stop there and pull up? And what do we have to do? Because we're supposed to keep the whole fenced off, but you can't fence off canal towpath.
No.
But the canal towpath is clearly diverted around by the level crossing, which the Oxford Preservation Trust own. And that is one problem we've got to resolve. Do we need notice to say you're not allowed to allow it? We're going to get this old towpath wall repaired because part of that is collapsed. But it didn't actually belong to British Rail. Our responsibility ended on the inside of that 8-inch wide stone wall. Thames Water say they only own as far as the water goes. And allegedly, the wall itself's never been transferred from Rewley Abbey. And that agreement is 1293. At the moment, we've got a slight problem. And I've suggested we better co-opt the wall if we can do it legally without taking too much responsibility. But you get all these problems with the restoration work, and the experts in the Preservation Trust are working on that. But what I've said is we must be absolutely sure before we put any invitations that you can, park up at the side of that wall and walk and look round. We've got to make absolutely sure all the safety regulations are in place. Otherwise, the trust is going to be liable. But that is another big problem with. But at least most of the work has been completed now, and as I say, if only we could answer this landing gear, then we can turn the bridge. I don't think fundraising will be a problem. And we're fortunate in that respect.
David?
A couple of points. You said certain areas you've been unable to find plans.
Sorry.
Been unable to find original plans.
We've been unable, yes,
Have you been to the county record office?
the county record office, unfortunately, haven't got anything on that.
Supposed to find-
We've found certain records in the Bodleian Library, but no detailed plans.
It's surprising because I researched the building of the London South Western Railway down in Hampshire, and they had an amazing amount of information from the time they built it and subsequently all in their records. They wouldn't let you take them out, but you could actually photograph them and do things like that.
That's the same with Bodleian. I think the problem came that it was transferred from the LMS in the 1930s. And was it Randy Bruce store at Paddington for all your plants on the Western? It wasn't actually taken in there, and John Mann, who was responsible for bridges, John used to tell me, but it was the loco department that took over the swing bridge, and the permanent way, if you remember, Rodney, ended at each end, and the depot manager used to have to deal with anything that was wrong on the bridge. But we've had crew, the people that are interested in the crew site, all their plans searched, and they can't find them. We've found all the plans for the passenger station building, and we've got bits, but this firm that took them away to copy them for the contractor, I just don't know, but we'll have another try. But the Oxford County Records Office, until recently, was all underground at County Hall, amongst all the steam heating pipes, and things were rotting, and there's no proper arrangements. And Devon County Council, when we had the celebration at Oxford Station for the Great Western Railway, it was actually Devon County Council who took the record I found in the Bodleian, and my father, who was retired then, came over to help with the shedmaster from Oxford to search records for Bill Bradshaw. And we got even the opening of the Whitney Railway and the brass plates and everything. And Devon County Council had to take those into store because we couldn't get anybody in Oxford County to take interest. But Devon have searched their Oxford records and can't find anything to help me.
The other source of information that I found when I was researching the London South Western Railway was the Institution of Civil Engineers. And in their archives, they had quite a few records there.
I'm sorry, Manuel's is on top. It's on my pocket. I thought you were saying, right, I'll try.
The Institution of Civil Engineers brought out a document, a plan of the line in 1837. Complete. It's about 40 feet long and one piece of
This role I'm trying to find.
yeah. So that's that. The other question I have, bear in mind, I've been using narrowboats recently. Up to 1984, you said that barges or narrowboats had to inform the signalman there with 4 hours notice. Was that absolute, or if it was quiet, would he let them know earlier?
You can find it still in some of the old 1960s, 1980s guides for use of the canal. It tells you to go to the station inspector on platform 1 at Oxford Station if you're wishing to go over there to give him notice. And I think it says normally the bridge is turned between 1300 and 1400, which was the time we used to do the coal shunt between the 2 cross-country trains on platform 1. And it says otherwise you could face up to 4 hours before a team could be gathered together. And that instruction apparently had been in since before the First World War.
One useful place to advise people on narrowboats, there are documents about all the different canals in great detail, and they put things like that in that you've got to do whatever you've got to do now if you've conserved it, preserved it, and they go into the Atkinson guides, and that's a useful source of information to warn you when you can do things and when you can't, and who you have to contact.
Well, basically, we're going to have some signs, and when we have an open day, it'll say the bridge may be closed for up to 15 minutes. So we've decided in the trust that if we do turn it, it'll only be closed because it takes about 10 minutes to wind them over. And if a barge turns up, obviously that'll be fun as well to have a barge there going through. And so the bridge will be shown as permanently open.
Yeah. It's closed, the canal part is closed at the moment, according to waterways.
Yeah.
But I've passed through a couple of times in narrowboat, but then the bridge was always in the open position.
Yeah.
Didn't have to do anything, just
No.
pass through, yeah.
No, so it'll always be like that.
Yeah.
So when we've got to know.
We found up in Manchester where the Manchester Ship Canal passes under one of the local canals, that they would shut that to the ship canal at 5:30 or something, and they then wound the big bridge out in midway and left the canal to carry on until the next day. So you get lots of information about
Yes.
it.
We'll certainly make sure we keep in touch with them. Yeah, sorry.
Richard.
I'll ask a couple of questions. Can I ask 2 things? One about money and one about the long-term future. You mentioned at the beginning that you managed to raise £1 million to start the project. Did more money have to come in, or how's
Yes,
that worked? Who supplied it?
Well, a lot of it has come through English Heritage
Right.
and through various benefactors and the Oxford Preservation Trust membership as well. And now we've set up the volunteers. Not all of them are engineers. And they all seem quite enthusiastic. So I think quite a lot of the smaller jobs, and including some of the technical ones, will actually be completed. And we've got a separate group that are safety trained now to do some of the smaller jobs. So we're expecting we may need to spend another 200 to 300,000 on it. And, obviously we shall set in motion some fundraising if that proves to be. They maintain Oxford Castle, they maintain a lot of the university buildings, Port Meadow, and even outside the city of Oxford now, the Preservation Trust have got quite a large area. And I think we've found that quite a few people are very interested in the unique bridge. And I think, you know, if we know what we're doing, and like I've asked you for the odd little bits, I mean, you know, 7 chairs, people say, well, only 7 chairs, but I mean, you know, it's an essential part. We very often find that people are kind enough to offer out, like Simon's often come and show me, or I'll get a couple of volunteers with me so he can show me how to do something, and hopefully we'll save money that way. But touch wood, as far as I know from the trust, if it's essential, the funding will appear.
So the link with the Oxford Preservation Trust is a long-term,
Well,
offers a long-term future too.
Yeah, like the castle there is responsible for it, the trust. Yes, it was handed over by Network Rail in 2019. Although I'd arranged in the transfer document, it was done in October 2003. When I transferred then all the plans and set up for the second time the preservation group. But then we had this problem, we couldn't start work until we got the preservation order changed. And we may have to do something special with the ends of the bridge, because don't forget, in its proper position, you would never have had access to them, all those London lanes. So we think we may have to have some hinging things on the end, protect them permanently with the bridge being open. Because again, we're going to get people pinch odd bits from the bridge.
Did you repair the bridge using hot rivets?
Sorry?
Hot riveting. Do you use hot rivets to repair the bridge, put new plates?
Did we?
Riveting.
I don't know what the contractors did all that.
Oh, right.
They the Preservation Trust asked me, because originally, I mean, I wasn't really involved in it, and you know, well, it's been very interesting. And I suppose I was the guilty one that got it preserved in the first place. So I went down to see the contractors and said, look, just clear the lot.
Right.
All I want to see are the steel girders and the motion underneath and the bridge rails and sides. Anything else, hear it.
Right, so the deck plates were obviously completely
Yeah,
shot.
and all the timber and everything that was on the top.
Right.
I just told them, don't bother faffing around preserving anything.
Right.
It's either British Rail or LMS. Just scrap it.
Right, I see.
Before anybody asks any questions. Unfortunately, the Preservation Trust accepted that, because it is no good. It costs you a fortune. The contractors we used were actually at the time restoring the House of Commons. They were the ones doing the work. I mean, they were all costly, but professionals. But they'd never done any railway work. So I was reliant on certain members of our family who are in the same industry as yourself in permanent way, and help from a few permanent way. And Richard and Simon.
So just remind me, how old is the oldest part of the bridge? Or was that wrought iron, the oldest part?
The oldest part of the bridge that we're sure is 1849.
1849.
Yeah, and all the gear work.
That'd be wrought iron, presumably then. That wrought iron, that would be.
That'd be wrought iron.
I see, yeah, yes.
I'm not sure about the bridges, because if you look at some of the plans, certainly 3 of the steel beams came from another bridge on the LNW main line in 1890.
Right, yes.
I haven't bothered to research how old they were, but some of them are second hand in 1890.
Right.
The original main line. And
Okay.
it's alleged there was experiments, but there's no proof, so we're only saying, you know, the motion and the gas line at the bottom.
And what's the length of the bridge?
The length of the bridge is, in old terms, about 75, it's either 75 or 78 foot.
Right.
The 8 lengths of rail are 40 foot, so yes.
And it's symmetrical, isn't it? So it's balanced about the centre point, but both sides the same.
Slightly off centre, and
Ah.
that's the other reason it's unique. And it's also at an angle, so
Yeah.
it's not like this, if you know the swing bridge at Boston, you know, as you go into the goods yard at Boston,
Right.
there's that old Great Northern swing bridge there. It's not the same design
No.
as that. So it's totally different to what we used on the Great.
Right. And the weight limit for it was 100 tons, was
It's
it?
100 tons.
Right. I see.
So when you raise the bridge
Yes.
on those supports,
Yes.
according to the sectional appendix, it's the limit 25 miles an hour, although
25.
I don't think I'll be doing 25, but
Well,
into the wood yard. but-
So you raise it up, so all the weight is taken off the pivot and it's supported at the ends. Otherwise, it'd hammer the pivot. Yeah.
That's probably why it's in good order.
Right. Yeah.
And allegedly, in the old days, the bridge would rarely turn more than 6 times a day. There's some records in there before the First World War.
So all the moving parts still move. You've got them all nicely greased up.
We've tried those, we've turned the bridge halfway and she goes very smoothly.
Oh, lovely. It's good.
And I've suggested to the Preservation Trust, whatever you do, don't get it stuck. Rodney will know I've been in trouble on numerous occasions with that bridge when the lads have been in a hurry to go to the pub at 1400. They've disappeared off to Southend with, and the shunt engines come off, and it's always been the Bletchley end that tips on.
Ah, right. They get stuck.
It wedges it, and you try and shift it. So experience, I think a lot of the non-rower people wonder why I keep lecturing them on not turning it too far, but I think as Rob
Yeah.
knows, it was
Well-
an embarrassment for me.
I've got plenty of experience of swing bridges and they're a pain. They always get stuck, especially with expansion on a hot day, they get stuck as well.
So his name and address.
Yes,
It's late on the.
yeah, I'm here next month.
That's right. that's
Yeah.
right.
Rodney, you were wanting to say
Well,
something?
John, that has answered half of what I was going to ask. The cross members are certainly wrought iron because of their shape, but really it's a question for these bridge engineers. Are there such bowed cross girders anywhere else?
Yeah, Volgrave.
Possibly intentional, I think.
I think they that's design because they're all equal, but it's I presume that's because of the training of those plates. It must have been those.
I can't think of any other reason, but
But there was obviously some strange reason why those centre had been rusted away and yet the rest didn't. I don't know, because there was space underneath.
Is it absolutely a unique design, that particular one, or is there any similarity to perhaps the Eastern Region ones across the Freedom and places like that?
It's completely different.
Yeah.
And certainly from my experience, you know, the one I know on the, obviously the Skegness line to come to Boston, but thinking of them and those on the northeast and the, you know, and it was an experiment by Robert Stevenson. I don't know what it was an experiment for, and they were darn lucky that it was still in the scrapyard, I would say. So it may have been something that he decided wasn't the right way to design a bridge. But it's there today. And allegedly, there's only two. But what the second one is, I don't know, because all the Preservation Trust have managed to come up with is one that's slightly off centre. In France, we can't find the one everybody's got in the record. So, you know, if any of you do have any clues, but that's a book that was written about 40 years ago.
David, you mentioned there was a crane in the yard just at the end of the bridge. What was that? What was that used for? And why did they have to stop using that in order to pass
That-
to
I probably should have said that was the last activity in the actual Rewley Road yard. we rented it as British Rail to Axel, Perry and Sim, who were the stone contractors for restoring like the university buildings. And they had, I think they're gone now, they had a big depot on the Botley Road. And the stone was delivered by rail once Rewley Road opened into that bottom corner opposite the signal box. And in LNW days, they had a crane built, and in order to unload the wagons, they unloaded them off the down main line going over the bridge into Shipley sidings, and of course that would be foul of a train movement. So the swing jib of the bridge was actually interlocked with the signal box, and that was still interlocked with the frame until we had the panel box in 1973.
So in the swing jib of the crane.
Of the crane, yeah. So not only did you need that centre bolt of the bridge locked, you need Axel, Perry, Sims, crane lock. Now the funny thing is, in the 1930s, there's no sign of the crane, and yet in pictures before the First World War, it's there, and it was certainly there in the 1940s and 1980s. So I don't know if that engine going over the bridge, you can't see it, but that's where the stone was offloaded. So probably they had a period when they had a mobile crane, I don't know, but the interlocking was certainly there until the panel box.
So there has to be locked out views in order to pass the train.
Yeah.
Okay, are we all done? Going. Gone.
Well, I hope I haven't bored you with.
Absolutely not. Very interesting. So thank you very much. Richard, could I call on you to do the vote of thanks?
I can't think why. Thank you, David, very much. It's most of the talks we have here are to do with modern railways, very technical, very advanced, all to do with sustainability. So that's a common factor. And electronics and modern gizmos that can measure the gauge of the track by looking at it from 30 feet and seeing that it's perfectly wrong or perfectly right. So it's nice to have a talk about something that we can all understand. Sort of bits of metal and things that work, and you can look at it and feel it. I think I've been specially selected to give the vote of thanks because of my connection. I'm at the heritage end of the railway world, the railway family, being involved in the Railway Museum at Didcot, and I'm well aware of how long it takes to do projects when one hasn't got all of the resources of the nation behind one, or even something like the Oxford Preservation Trust behind one. But even then it takes a while, and one's got to get the politics going and the priorities going so that the project gets sufficient resources. It's interesting that you should mention Bill Bradshaw, because I was going to mention him, because many years ago, I remember being approached, and it came to me, said, have you thought, could you possibly, accommodate this bridge at Didcot at the Railway Museum? I don't know quite how that ties in with all the shenanigans with it becoming an ancient monument, which is even worse than being a listed building, of course. Sorry, hope people can see. But it's interesting, it's all been worked out. And it's quite interesting that being an ancient monument, something that characterises those, I think, is how they often are stripped back. And I don't mean that in a vandalistic way. I mean that in an authentic way to being the basics. And I noted your, one of the things you said at the beginning, and you repeated about how you decided very clearly at the beginning what the instructions were to contractors and what the recommendation was to the trust about how the bridge should be restored. And you said, don't fiddle around with bits and pieces. And, those of us in heritage preservation know that you can spend a lot of time, waste a lot of time, but maybe not waste, but go down many rabbit holes by taking account of many people's advice about the bits and pieces, many of whom are not very well informed, and many of whom certainly are not practiced in knowing the implications of fiddling around with the bits and pieces because they've never done it. And you set out a clear strategy. It should be cleared, set right, and I think looking at those photographs at the end of how it looks today, the simplicity comes over far better as an example to everybody than having something that's very complicated. And I think that's something in the heritage movement that we all ought to learn from as well. And then there's the whole issue of looking after it in the long term, which is always a problem. So, excellent talk, most interesting, as I say, something that we can all understand. We've had 1 or 2 talks about bridges, but we have a bridge near here that one of our members was leading in the design of, but it's very different to this. We're all looking forward to coming and have a good turn on that wheel one day. Next year sounds ever so promising. We promise we won't get it stuck. We'll come on a cold day and we'll bring plenty of mussels with us. So thank you for coming along. It's very interesting, very entertaining. We wish you well and the trust well with the project, and hope it will get advertised, hope it will perhaps be featured in the Railway Heritage Trust awards for the year or a year. Much will be made of it in Oxford. That even on the station at Oxford Station, all the renewal work going on there, there'll be a panel or 2 telling people to look out for this bridge and catch a train to Banbury so that you get a view out of the window. You know, it won't cost much, but have a good look. So thank you very much for a most excellent evening. You've attracted the largest attendance we've had at these meetings for some time, and that's not, I think that's partly through illness and weather, but we've certainly got everybody to turn out tonight. So thank you, David, very much. Usual. Well, yes, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you.
You think you'll finish your job before or after they've done the railway under the railway? What's it running?
I'm going to say this before connected with that bridge job in 1968, a similar problem. I think it's going to take a long time and yes, Bill Bradshaw, he was working with me when we were trying to find out what to do, and he did try to get it to Didcot before we could get it.
I even came up with a location and a design and an interpretation arrangement, but then it didn't happen, much to our relief.
Thanks for that. Can I say thanks for those of us who are online? Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.
Richard.
Well, we've already trumped it by pointing out that our next speaker's sat there. In fact, he's ready to give the talk now. So John Shreves will be talking about the Rother Valley Railway reconstruction, HS2 on a shoestring, which I'm sure will incorporate the interesting tale of establishing a new level crossing over an A road. In spite of talks we've had in the past about level crossings and how their days are numbered from a lot of people's points of view. So that's next month, 4th of June.
Yeah.
And then
So all the automatic. You can do it now if you want it.
So, the first time I've actually managed to achieve next month's meeting.
It's all there.
So, that's what we're looking forward to next month. So, yeah, I think that's it. Completes everything that we need to do for this evening. All I can say to everyone, thank you for making the effort coming out, our biggest turnout of the year. Thank you for those who joined online. We peaked at 7 on there as well. We had 23 here, so we had 30 people. It's like the good old days. Pre-COVID, we haven't achieved 30 people for, well, the joint meeting. We've done more than that. But, so well done to everybody. Can I remind the people at home, when you shut down, please leave the meeting. Press the big red button on the top so that the recording automatically shuts down. So thank you for making sure you do that. That would be useful. Please remember the way out is halfway down the building next to the funny doors, next to the cafe in the middle where the fridge is full of beer. So go past that and out through that side door. Don't try going out the way we came in. So we shall retire and have a swift ale at the Three Guineas, I guess, if anyone wants to join us at the place of refreshment. And we shall look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, good night.
Thanks, Ray. Bye.
Does that go is sustainable?
Yes. Well, I think feature